sure that participating them. This is Hiramoni and welcome to It Gets It. The word pandemic. I think in the entire human history, the number of times we have used this word probably less than how many times we have used the word pandemic over the last one single virus has becomes this becomes such an important it has affected millions of people and causing deaths. And when people hear the word pandemic every day in news headlines, people become fearful, and that's understandable. But with fear also comes misinformation. With fear comes rumors. And we are at an age where disinformation can be shared and spread in seconds. Things like protecting us with face masks, gloves, looks like a good idea. In fact, it's a great idea. But um, if I talk about gloves, they are designed to protect the skin. So they're designed to frequently change the temperature. And then you can also lead with false confidence that somebody is protected. So you put this less with your so some people also think that food is like vitamin C, like essential oil, garlic are good to positive virus. But is it true? We have seen and I agree. So today's show, I'm going to try and get some people also say that when we focus so much on the physical well-being, that it actually has an impact on our mental well-being. We discuss that too. And there is the other side. Lockdown is definitely from social, economic, and logistic science. So for some, lockdown is not necessary. Instead, social distancing could be the same and it would have the same. But in reality, is social distancing how effective it is if you have to keep social distancing in public places? We will discuss all that and more, and I have a fantastic panel of guests today. Some of them are frontline workers, some of them are experts. They have got their real stories. So if you're talking about getting the right and authentic source of information, then I think we have absolutely nailed it with our panel of guests today. And I'm supremely excited to bring them here and start the discussion. So my first guest today is he is Dr. Jayanta Sarma.
Hello.
Hello, Dada. Good to see you, and thank you for joining in. Uh, Dr. Jayanta Sarma. He is a microbiologist and a virologist for National Health Service England. Um,
Hello.
and
I just got a hospital call. Could you please start with the another call, another member, please? Hello.
Okay, I think in that time I'll just bring our second guest. Our second guest is John. Hello, John. John is a police officer in the UK. He's a frontline worker, and you will see him on the streets of UK sorting out people who break rules and also keeping us safe. John will have lots to talk about, but let me bring the other two guests as well.
Sure.
Our third guest is Deetima. Dr. Deetima Gayan, lovely to see you here, and thank you for joining in. Deetima is a psychiatrist consultant for the National Health Service, England, and she also got infected by the virus. So we have a lot to talk about that as well. And finally, our fourth guest is Dr. Bhaskar. Hi, Bhaskar. Good to see you. Bhaskar is an anesthetist. He is a frontline worker, and he is working in the COVID-19 ward. Plus, he also got infected by the virus. So I think we'll like to talk about that as well. Um, I think I have lost Dr. Jayanta Sarma. That's because he has got a call from the hospital. So I'm sure he will join in a minute. So maybe I'll start with John. Um,
Here.
Great. Actually, do you know what? He is back. So let me try and see if I can bring him back. Yes. Can you hear us, Jantada? Jantada, you'll have to unmute your speaker. Yes.
I'm very sorry. It was a hospital call, so I had to attend. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's really fine. But in the meantime, I've introduced everybody, rest of the panel and our guests. So, Jantada, I'll come to you. My first question is, at the time, beginning of the pandemic, what we knew about the virus and what we know now. I think we know far more, knowing that, there has been so much of work and studies that have done to understand the virus. But with information also comes misconceptions. Some of the misconceptions are floating around. And I think part of the problem is that a lot of it have not come from doctors or scientists or researchers. Um, so I want to take this opportunity to go deeper and understand the virus a little bit more, its characteristics, its nature. How does it transmit from one to the other? Is it as simple as we think, or it's just one aspect? So yeah, I want to kind of get your views. And I also want to get your views about, using face masks, gloves, excessive use of sanitization. What's your view?
Okay. I mean, we got the benefit of hindsight now, but even when, at the very beginning, I think we always knew it was a respiratory virus. So and it was an enveloped virus. It was an mRNA virus. So we knew actually from, when we apply basic principles, we actually knew from the very beginning how it would behave. But now we got benefit of hindsight as well. How does it transmit? I think there is nothing extraordinary about it. It transmits by respiratory route. It's a direct transmission, from person to person. If I cough, and if you happen to be within a perimeter of 2 meters or 1 meter, whatever the distance is, I will transmit it directly to yourself. So that is a direct mode of transmission as far as a respiratory virus is concerned. Then it has got an indirect mode of transmission as well, which is via fomites. So if I contaminate the surface, I am the infected person, I have contaminated my surroundings, my tables, my whatever, the fomites, and you happen to touch those fomites, and you then kind of touch your mucosal surfaces, eyes and mouth, then that is the indirect transmission. You would be infected. So that is the very essence, that is the very basics. And if we keep talking about that it gets transmitted by aerosols and so on, it might, but that is not its regular mode of transmission. Aerosol transmission is possible in hospital context. If I intentionally generate aerosols by performing a aerosol generating procedure, then virus particle would be aerosolized. That is the less than 5 micron, very tiny particles, and they would remain, the particles would remain suspended for a prolonged period of time, and that's basically make the virus very efficient. But that is extraordinary. That is in hospital setting. In normal day-to-day household setting, it is a direct transmission and indirect transmission via fomites. So preventative measures are very simple.
Sure.
If I am the infected person and a responsible person, I exercise respiratory etiquette. And you, being a careful, aware person, you wear face mask, and you wash your hand like we should be doing anyway.
Yeah.
We should be doing anyway.
Yeah.
I think you asked me a question about washing hand excessively, or I don't see any issue with that. In hospital practice, I mean, every doctor and nurses, I don't know about Indian setting, I'm very skeptical that hand hygiene is practiced to the standard that we like it to be practiced. But in the UK, I think hand hygiene, I think we do it like 20 times a day, probably more. So
Sure.
I don't see that is an issue. The issue is not doing it enough.
Sure.
I think
Okay.
that is the issue, you
Yeah.
know. So I can. I think I set the scene. You may ask me, exploratory
Of
question.
course. Yeah, no, I think you are trying to say that, there cannot be harm of excessive, cleaning of your hands or whatever that is. And I think all it is about misconception. I would say that, we have the tendency to share any new information we get through our social media or our email. I think it's time that we kind of stop and think, where these information are coming from, because it's so much of information.
It is wrong information, but at the same time, I want to put things in perspective.
Sure.
This virus is a respiratory virus. I was talking about first principle. The first principle is that respiratory virus thrives in closed indoor area. They would thrive in enclosed spaces in households where people live. More people live in a per square feet area. We know from New York. New York had three big divisions. One is the Manhattan area, the affluent area. Then we have Queens and another, other part, I forgot the name. Those are the now little bit underprivileged area. And per square feet, human being living per square feet is more. And we know those two areas suffered more. Here in England, we know London suffered more. We know all the cities in Mumbai. What is happening? It is the world densest city.
Yeah.
So with hindsight, we exactly know where the virus is, how the virus is spreading, and it is not diffusing. The idea we have got, as if a drop of ink in a glass of water, like it diffusing, it is not like that. Virus doesn't diffuse.
No. Yeah.
If
Yeah. I will come to you about the graphs, because I'm very interested to know how the virus is looking and the infection looking different based on geography. You have touched upon, but I'll want to know more. But for now, I'll want to go to John.
Sure.
John, obviously in England, we have a different curve now. We had strict rules for lockdown. Now
That's right.
we're going through unlock. Shops are open. Yesterday, all the pubs, restaurants, hotels got opened as well. More and more people will get out. I wanted to know what's been the role of the police department throughout this pandemic. And also kind of services like emergency services, ambulance services, do they also fall under police department? And what kind of power you could or you can use, and when do you have to find people? I just wanted to get like an overall idea about what's been the role
Yeah,
of
sure.
this
Yeah,
department.
no problem. So, right at the beginning of the pandemic, when it was declared a pandemic here in the UK, and as Dr. Sarma said, we started to look at the various actions here in the UK to protect the NHS. An act of Parliament was enacted here in the UK, so the Coronavirus Act actually became law, and that's given us the legal framework to deliver what we need to do to basically to address sort of three different points. One was around public safety, so looking at the limiting, as Dr. Sarma said, limiting contact, reducing mass gatherings, illegal gatherings, and effectively, as we've moved through various stages of lockdown here in the UK, enacting what the policy is of that week, month, etc. The overarching Coronavirus Act gives us our powers. So there's a number of things we can do. One is to stop gatherings, stop social gatherings which are outside of the guidance given by the government.
Sure.
Which would include enforcing social distancing as well.
Okay.
the second one we can do, which is we can deal with some incredibly difficult people, as you can imagine, in the police. So we do actually have powers to detain those that we believe to be infected and ignoring government guidance or quarantine that they should be placed in. So that's one of the things we can do. And then lastly, and it's one that thankfully hasn't had to happen too much, has been we have the power to close small businesses which are not adhering to the COVID-19 Act again.
So what kind of small businesses we're talking?
Small independent pubs, you know, food eateries, all sorts of places really. And it could be the independent car wash that's in a small town. It could be someone that's working as a builder somewhere. Right at the beginning, it was obviously very strict. So the police went down the route of bringing in what we call fixed penalty notices, which is very similar to some of the, like a parking fine, or alternatively what we'd use for sort of public order, which is to deal with public gatherings and you know, what you'd see on a Saturday night, where if you've got a few people that have had too much to drink, you know, they don't want to behave themselves, we can disperse, we can deal with them in different ways. So essentially, we've been encouraging the officers, our colleagues, not to revert straight to a fine. Really, we've been very reliant on public goodwill, which I think we've probably seen it's been largely quite positive in many ways, and certainly in some forces, you know, forces were overcome with neighbours ringing and, you know, telling tales on their neighbours that weren't adhering to social distancing, which was under a completely different level of strain. But yeah, it would start with a fine. If the same person then commits the same offence, that fine on the second time will double.
So what's the fine like? How much?
So the fine at the moment, the initial fine is £60.
Sure.
That will rise to £120 on the second offence. And essentially any sort of element of non-compliance with anything that I've spoken about, that does carry with it, due to the other powers we hold, the power of arrest around that, because it's largely seen as a public safety issue.
Yeah.
So I would say, you know, mass gatherings has been, and we're not talking about sort of the larger gatherings that have obviously been on the news, but certainly mass gatherings with people having parties and all sorts of things, which is clearly undoing the work of the NHS from our perspective. We've also worked very closely with the NHS on such things as officers going to addresses, sudden deaths, all that sort of thing, where people have actually sadly passed away due to coronavirus, and working with our ambulance colleagues to deal with those as well. So very much on the front line.
All right. So the ambulance service also comes under police department.
Yeah, we work very closely. So it's very much for the purpose. We work very closely with the ambulance service, all different agencies, and the fire brigade to be able to deliver certain solutions. So.
Yeah. Okay. Now, thank you for giving us this insights. I think it sounds like that people can now do what they want to, but it's more the gatherings when they don't follow social distancing guidelines. That's when probably you need to tell and encourage compliance, I suppose.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, we obviously have our colleagues in the British Transport Police who are. It's now a railway bylaw that people have to wear a face mask on public transport, and that's enforceable by the police as well. So it's just another thing that our colleagues are dealing with. But yeah, you're absolutely right here. The mass gatherings are the major issue for us, and the ones that face us regularly. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for all the information. I'll have more questions for you, John. But coming to Deetima. So Deetima, obviously, you had been infected by the virus. And for some people, they may think that they only see and know about the virus when they pick up a newspaper, when they, watch television, but they don't see anybody in their circle, their friends and family getting infected. So it's almost like, this virus is for others, you know. And then I have got a panel of 4 guests here. 2 of them have been infected. And then in the UK, we have an SMEs community, which is small, but we know people who have been infected. They all have recovered and gone back to normal. So thank you for coming out and telling about that. You also have been infected by the virus. What I wanted to know is, when you got to know that probably you have got the virus, what kind of symptoms did you see? And what did you do quickly after that? And I also want to know about the recovery process, like how much time it took you, if you can just share your experience.
Yes, thank you, Hira. As you have introduced me, I'm a consultant psychiatrist, and I picked up the virus from the first patient in my hospital who was positive for his antigen. And I didn't know at that time when I picked it up. So I had a call on a Sunday from my nurse to confirm that my patient had been infected, and that confirmed my doubts because I had started with the symptoms from Saturday, the Saturday before that Sunday. So that was overwhelming body ache, headache, and exhaustion. I was flat. I was just flat. I couldn't, do even my normal activities at home. I mean, I needed help for that. And after that came loss of sense of taste and smell. And that was very, very significant. It lasted for a long time, as did the exhaustion. So the moment I came to know that I am infected, I obviously isolated myself within the family home. I live with my 2 sons, my husband, and my mum from India is also, who was visiting and could not actually go back to India, could not return because of the lockdown, both here and in India. So I had to self-isolate myself. But because, as you know, and Dr. Sharma will tell you more about it, that you can infect other people before you show symptoms. So I must have infected my sons and my husband as well, because they came down with symptoms as well.
Okay. All right. But where the symptoms were mild mostly, was it?
Actually, my symptoms were quite of a moderate degree, because I was, as I explained, I was not able to do any of the activities of my daily life, like, you still have to push yourself to do it, but it was really, really effortful. It wasn't as easy as you would normally think, and not even in a normal viral infection, the flu that we get in the winters. It wasn't anything like that. It was much more than that. However, my sons did not get the symptoms. And it is more important to understand that despite all those symptoms and the time that it required, I had acute symptoms for about 2 weeks, and I took at least 3 more weeks to recuperate from the exhaustion. But it is recoverable, and I am back to normal, back to myself. And while everything was happening and I was at home and I had to self-isolate, but the children still came down, we had to practice all the hand hygiene, the washing, the separating out of each other's towels and not really mixing up, and trying to separate as much as you can, and as much as I could from my children. One of them is 6 and the other one is 8, so you can understand that. But we did that, and all of us are in great health now and recovered from the illness just like any other illness. So there you go. You come out and you recover off that.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic message that, you have got it, you get it, but then, the entire family, but you can recover. It's, you're treated well, and you're back to normal. I think that's a very strong message. And thank you for sharing your personal experience. I think, it will be useful for the audience as well. So thank you, Deetima. Coming to Bhaskar. Bhaskar is a frontline worker, and he's working as an anesthetist for the COVID-19 ward. I'll come to that, but before that, you also got infected by the virus, you say.
So I want to know when you got to know, was it scary? I mean, that knowing how it can affect people. So was it scary? And do you also, like Deetima, think that you might have got it from one of your patients, maybe? And I have got one more question to ask you. Now that you have recovered, what message would you put out there? Because I think there are two types of categories. One who are quite fearful about what's going on, about their physical well-being. And probably there is another category who think the virus doesn't exist. I mean, I can only say this based on some of the incidents, who don't follow any sorts of guidelines. So for both these categories, now that you had it, you have come out of it, what message would you put out there?
Sure, I'll just address the first part, was it scary or not? So I actually already had a feeling that I was COVID positive because the symptoms were very, very different from the normal seasonal flu. So especially the loss of taste and smell. So I knew instantly that this is COVID. Uh, then when I got tested and when the results came back as positive, I actually was a bit relieved for a couple of reasons. First reason was, I was expected to go back to work after kind of 48 hours of afebrile period if I'm feeling well. And, in between my fever episodes, I was feeling quite okay. I had the cough, and I was told that the cough will last for weeks to months. So don't worry about that. And we were not supposed to go through, a negative taste to join back to work. And also sitting back at home was not something that I like. So I thought if I have 48 hours of afebrile period, I'll go back to work. So I thought, getting two flus back to back, within a month or within a month or so, will probably take a very hard toll on my body. So I thought if it's COVID, then I'll probably have some form of immunity now. I felt okay actually. I was not scared or worried. Also, I mean, by the time I got tested, my symptoms were slowly getting better. So I was I was not scared at all.
Sure.
Coming to the second part of your question, I think it is difficult, isn't it? Like people have it enough. Like they had 3 months of lockdown. Now they all want to go out. So I can understand that point. But I suggest just follow government advice. We all have responsibilities as as citizens of this country to towards our communities. And if we all do our bits, like maintaining a appropriate distance from other people, wearing masks as advised, and wearing sanitization. Oh, sorry, I mean following sanitization, etc. I think if we do our bits, we should feel proud in ourselves. So I think that's what my message would be to the people.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful message. I think, if all of us do our bits, I think the country is trying to do something for greater good. I think, we should only feel proud. And like John said, we're just helping each other. Like police is helping the NHS is helping the country. I think we just have to be a part of the whole system. So thank you, Bhaskar, for your answer. I'm coming back to John Toda now. John Toda, I think your mic is mute, if I'm not wrong. Yes, yeah. I have got a question, but before that, I quickly wanted to ask you something. Himanta Biswa Sarma, people know him very well in Assam. He is the health minister of Assam with other portfolios as well. He's your brother, and he's managing the show in Assam. And you are a virologist. So does he call you for your advice?
I mean, he did. I mean, initially we were in conversation. I used to give him few information, but now India got an established policy. It is Indian Council of Medical Research, then central government. They got a framework. So I think I have to be honest. Of late, I haven't been advising him. I never advised him. I'm not in that capacity, but I did pass on some information to him before. But of late, I'm not doing that because they are following their established protocol now. So my role is very minimal. I do write few articles in our Assamese newspaper. So I'm in conversation with the public rather than with him, to be honest.
With the brother. Okay, great. Okay, so coming to my actual question then, is, you touched upon this graph of different countries. Like, we went to a peak and now we are told that the reproductive number, our number is under control. But when we were at the peak, I think India's numbers were pretty less. I think we couldn't even call it a pandemic in India. And it's similar for other parts of European countries as well. So I want to get an analysis from you, which again you touched upon already. In terms of these graphs, how it changes geographically. So that's one of my questions. I have got one more. And that some people are saying that, there can be a second wave, which possibly will be in the winter. Now, what do you think? Is the virus seasonal sensitive, or is it like any other flu-like illness where in winter it is on the rise? So what's your view on that as well?
You see, I like these microbes. I can go on and on speaking about this virus, but let me see if I can do justice to your question. I mean, in Europe, what we have seen is a typical outbreak, typical epidemic. Pandemic is a different word. Pandemic is like it is worldwide, but let us concentrate to epidemic in individual countries. So, for example, in England, what did we see? I mean, it is a typical epidemic curve. It is a textbook example of an epidemic curve. Exponential growth to start with, middle of March. I think our number was probably 2 or even approached 3, during that exponential phase. Then it reached the, plateau, the summit. It stayed there for a while, and then it has come down. And today, I'll give you the last 7 days average, number from Health Protection Agency. The current prevalence in the UK is 0.006%. It is almost like it has come back to baseline now. And how long did it take? It took about 3 months. But we have seen in some countries, for example, in Hubei, in China, where it started, the whole thing ran about 12 weeks. So definitely in the UK, it ran a longer course. But again, that is according to theory. Because we have flattened the curve to some extent, not to the entire, to the full extent, but we did manage to flatten it, So when you flatten the curve, you don't reduce the total number of infections. All you do, you buy time. You spread the epidemic over a longer period of time. So instead of 12 weeks, here we got 24 weeks. You see, that is what it is. So it is a catch-22 situation.
Sure.
If you suppress it too much, there will be a second wave. Because the virus is there. The virus is out there. We didn't manage to extinct it. We didn't manage to eradicate it. So if you suppress too much, all you are doing, you are keeping the cases for the future. But if you allow you to go in a controlled way, like in keeping with your healthcare capacity, I think that is the best strategy. And that was the initial strategy with the UK government. Then the pandemic, the epidemic model came through. It has created a panic, a sense of panic. And at that time, it was going exponential in Italy and Spain. So everybody was taken aback, and I think we made some exaggerated response. But now in hindsight, I can tell that. But people in their wisdom made the decision, and this is where we are now. And in India, your observation is so good. You see, we never had an epidemic in India in a strictest sense. In our number in India is just over 1. All you see is a sustained rise of cases. There is no exponential rise of cases. And I today checked the latest number. Our number is hovering above 1, 1.2, 1.3. I think it went up to 1.5 at some stage, but now it is in Maharashtra about 1.2, 1.3.
Sure. Okay. So that's still okay, isn't it? 1.2, 1.3.
Yeah, we need to get it under 1. Then only epidemic would subside. Okay. If it remain kind of hover around 1, then what we call it an endemic situation, rather than pandemic or epidemic. It's an endemic situation. I think I fear that in India, probably in some pockets, it would become an endemic. It would probably go for a prolonged period of time, but it would not run in havoc. It won't run in havoc because we see mortality in India is very minimal. Again, I got my own theory why that is the case. And if I contrast that with the United Kingdom, here we had about 60,000 excess mortality.
Yes.
And about more than half of that is attributed to the nursing homes. So you see, nursing home is a closed space, residential places. These are closed places by definition, where large number of people reside under one roof, and those are the spots. The counterpart of that in India are the slum area or the dense residential area, like a block of flat, where many people living in a small room, perhaps, So those are the hotspot areas we need to concentrate. We need to focus our health promotion activities, if we are to control this epidemic.
Okay, all right, brilliant. No, thank you for that analysis. I think here also in the UK, people fear about the second wave. But
yeah, second wave is a very theoretic. I mean, it is if as I actually given you the theory. Suppressing the curve, flattening the curve is one theory, which we always did. With every time there was an epidemic, we practiced social distancing. We tried to flatten the curve. That is the standard. But this time, extraordinarily, what we tried to do, we tried to suppress the virus, and we failed. Because we failed with suppressing the virus, to me, there would not be a second wave. If we did success with the suppression of the virus, there would have been a second wave the moment we lifted the restrictive measures. So these are the test of theories as well. But my prediction, there is not going to be a second wave in England, but we may have a rise with the winter. There may be a fresh episode of cases, fresh, like a new thing,
Okay, I really hope that will come true because, the world wants that. But thank you for your answer. I'm coming to John now. John, when there are rules, there are rule breakers. And we have had incidents here where, we had a couple of glorious sunny days and people feel the need to get out because we don't get enough sun. And we had incidents where, the beaches were full of people, soaking the sun next to each other. Now, I wanted to know if you have witnessed any such incidents during the pandemic. And in such incidents, what power can you use? You have touched upon a little bit already. But, when things go out of hand, what power can you use? And then also I wanted to know your viewpoint, in terms of the psychology side. When someone does things like that, when they think that breaking rules are all right, is there some kind of psychology that you see in them, why they do what they do, and just your viewpoint?
Yes, I'd say there probably is. I think obviously from our perspective, we what we can do is we have a number of legal frameworks, if you like, within our tool belt which we can use to disperse mass gatherings. So judgments can be made on a mass gathering, and certain certain acts can be enacted. So, for instance, officers of a certain rank can look at areas. They can make a judgment based upon whether there's likely to be other things that will come along. And we're talking about what you were saying with people that will just break the rules. Let's be honest. They can look at other points. So they can look at things like the welfare of residents in an area where mass gatherings could take place. They can look at the likelihood for disorder in an area where mass gatherings can take place. And they can also look at, is social distancing in place? So it ends up as kind of a balancing act of using a number of laws that are at our disposal, which cover antisocial behaviour, public order in itself, which is what we give, which is something that we give a name to for anything which is a mass gathering or licensed premises or protest or procession or anything like that. It comes under the Public Order Act here in the UK. and that covers a huge diverse amount of actual events. So essentially a decision will be made whether it's a protest, allow something to go ahead, and put conditions around it to try and limit the amount of time that protest actually happens.
Yeah.
You know, it's the balance between protecting people's human rights and trying to obviously support the fight against coronavirus and other items, and also, you know, maintain order as well. But yeah, I mean, to give you an example, locally in a town near where I live, a certain area was targeted. There was a mass gathering one weekend. It caught everyone completely by surprise. There was small instances of disorder. Broken glass was left behind in an area which was absolutely lovely. You know, people were completely ill-equipped to actually deal with it. So the local police commander, he issued, he used a piece of law, what we call a Section 35, which allows powers to disperse anyone in an area, and that can be time stamped. So it will start at a certain time, end at another time, and the idea being is it will limit the amount of people that can participate in any type of mass gathering in a prescribed area for a certain period of time.
Sure.
If they try and countermine that, they're arrestable.
Okay,
well.
So can be arrested.
Absolutely.
So that's okay.
Again, we would try and disperse people rather than arrest them, because there's also the human, and Dr. Sarma sort of touched on it earlier. There's the human point of people being locked up, the effect on people's mental health over 3 months, and you know there is probably a massive temptation for, right, we've eased a certain amount of restrictions, and they just go completely off the handle, right? Because it's the first time they're allowed out.
Yes.
So there's a bit of a balance there from our perspective in how we actually use our powers.
Sure. So it's more of a balancing act, I think, for police.
It is, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, that is wonderful. Thank you, John. And for Deetima, coming to you, I can see some of the comments where people are saying that your experience was really helpful. It matters a lot to them. So I think, thank you for sharing that experience. Now, because you are a psychiatrist, so I must have to ask this question. Mental health is being discussed, and it is acknowledged that if we are not suffering, some of us from the virus, but mentally a lot of us are suffering for whatever reason during lockdown. So my question is, when is that time when we know that these symptoms don't look like normal anxiety, but they fall under mental health category? And sometimes, we don't see it in ourselves, but we see it in others, whether our family, our friends. When we do, how do we approach it? I mean, how do we tell that person, and how do we convince that, it's a good thing to go and see the specialist? I mean, if you could just take us through that step-by-step kind of guide, I think that would be really useful.
Well, I'll try to. Thank you for the question. So we are going through a very unusual period of time. This is, you can't even say it's a one in a generation. It's sometimes 1 in 2 generations type of a situation or a circumstance. Not everyone has seen, lockdowns like this. I certainly don't remember, but my younger child is 6 years old, and he already is going through this kind of a phase, and so is everyone else. And even in my practice, we have come across people where, as John suggested, I mean, the human aspect of being locked down for such a long time is not easy for anyone to actually understand, make sense of, and justify. We are aware this is a pandemic, we have government guidelines, but, you can only follow them until you don't feel overwhelmed yourself by an anxiety about the issue of the condition itself, i.e. the virus, how it is going to affect us. So that is why I thought it was very important for me to come out today and talk about this, because it is very normal to experience anxiety about this virus, because it's a new virus. It has affected everywhere in the world, and people can hear on the radio, on television, news about so many people dying. But Dr. Sharma has touched on it, so I wouldn't go into that. But what I can tell you is everyone, our friends and family, can experience anxiety. However, if that anxiety becomes overwhelming, where they aren't able to carry on with their normal life, they resist from making telephone contact with their family members, or do not necessarily want to take, calls from their family, because obviously we're not seeing them, but we can keep in touch with them over the phone. I guess that's when we might suspect that maybe someone is being affected in a way that is not necessarily normal. And then there are people who already have symptoms or already have diagnosis of mental health, and they can be predisposed to having a even worse presentation. I have had in my own practice, patients come over where specifically they have talked about this lockdown as the reason for their anxiety going sky high. And you have to treat that. You can't dismiss that, because that can then secondarily lead to a number of other mental health issues. So addressing that part of your question. The rest of it is, if we see and notice in our friends and family, starting from young children, I do not feel it is something we dismiss about. I think the children have been away from school, so we do have to give them a reason why they're away. So this is a pandemic. This is a situation affecting the entire world. There might be a slightly exaggerated response, but that was the response. Children are at home, so we need to explain to them why, because they miss their friends as well. I mean, they do keep in touch with them via Zoom sessions with their teachers, and all of this is happening in here, and I'm sure it's happening in India as well. But it is important to make sure they understand that social distancing is appropriate, and that they are going through something which is absolutely new even for their parents. Yes. And that's how. And for my mom, who's staying with me at this time, who also has never experienced anything like this, I mean, you have to make sure that they understand, or that even though I'm going to work, when after I recuperated from my illness, I have been to work. So she's been asking me to be careful, but you can do as much as you can do and hope for the best. But sure, it is in the community, it can still affect you. That does not mean that you are, you have nothing to recover, or you can't recover, anything like that. You can recover, you can get back to normal health. Yes, you need to take care of other issues which might, complicate it, but most of the people recover from it, and sure, they get back to normal.
Okay, great. No, thank you for picking up those different symptoms and things like that, because, in England, at least 1 out of 4 people do suffer from mental illness at some point in their lives. And I think that statement just make it so normal. I mean, it's very normal. Just take in charge and do something about it. So, no, thank you for all the things that you said. Bhaskar,
yes, I just wanted to, because sort of reiterate that in India nowadays, I think there is a big drive for mental health to become less stigmatized, I suppose. I think there are celebrities who are jumping the bandwagon to make mental health known and accessible. And I think, this pandemic has given us the opportunity to actually work on that, even at a lower level of anxiety. And I think this is a good chance to let people understand that if you're anxious, you come out with it, you speak to your family, you speak to your friends, and you speak to professionals if you need to. I think this is a good thing that has happened out of the pandemic.
Sure. It's a testing time, basically. Yeah, good. No, thank you, Deetima. Coming to Bhaskar. Bhaskar, during the pandemic, obviously, we know that hospitals had to redesign their structure internally. Like we have a non-COVID ward, a COVID ward, and all social distancing measures for patients or staff or visitors. So if you could just take us through the structure, how it's looking like in hospitals during the pandemic. And do you think, what's your view? Do you think hospitals or NHS has done enough to respond to the pandemic or not?
Right. So yeah, this is kind of my area. So I do not work in the ward. So, but I can tell a little bit about the intensive care unit. So the structure of the intensive care unit basically depends on a lot of factor when there is something like COVID is going on. But two most important things are infection control and your protection of your healthcare workers. So within we in ITU we always take measures based on guidance from the infection control board. So everything is kind of is a teamwork basically. And within the intensive care unit, there is, if I talk about the airflow system, there's a positive airflow system, and there is potential that this positive airflow system can spread the aerosols from infected patients to non-infected areas, and can infect your staff, can infect other non-infected patients. So in our hospital, we had to basically separate two or form two ITUs. Basically, one was for COVID patients and one was for non-COVID patients. As we started to get, the numbers got decreased and we came back to one unit, we had to kind of create two negative pressure cubicles inside our main ITU so that we can have the COVID patients inside the same ITU. But, the airflow system is not going to kind of spread the aerosols across to the other areas of the ITU. So that is one of the important things. Other things are, I think, we had clear demarcations within the ITU or outside the ITU or across the hospital as well for visitors uh, regarding appropriate social distancing. We had to make sanitizers available at maybe extra few sanitizers here and there as well within the hospital.
Yeah, cool.
In terms of,
Do you think the hospitals have done enough to respond to the pandemic?
I mean, we didn't have an experience of a pandemic before, So now that we have had one, probably future pandemics or future or anything of this kind, we will be better prepared. But I think we responded very well, and I think in terms of our performance, I think if I talk about our own ITU, we have performed like similarly across the compared to other intensive cares in the country. Again, I mean, staying with the structure, I think one area is like wearing your personal protective equipment and then taking off the gear. It's also important that you have a dedicated area for wearing your PPE and taking off your PPE, which we have to kind of make.
Okay, so you think NHS have done what they could within the time scale and the budget and the resources, I suppose. But definitely now anything else comes in the future similar, you're well prepared.
Yeah, I think it was always going to be difficult, wasn't it? I mean, we had thought, initially we thought we don't have enough PPEs, but we had to work what we had. And I think within the limitations, we performed reasonably well.
Sure, great. All right. I think because I'm running out of time now, so I have a very quick round, very quick answer as well. So I think one line answers would be appreciated, but I'll start from Jayanta. So the world wants to know, obviously, the solution. What's the solution for COVID-19? So what's your view? What are we coming up with a vaccine or what's happening? I think your mic is mute.
Yes. I mean, we've done all we can with non-pharmaceutical interventions, but we do need pharmaceutical interventions, so medicine and vaccines. I think we got now that we know that steroids works in the very severe spectrum of the disease. Steroid does help. Then another medicine, remdesivir, does help a little bit as well. But I think the company is going to make a lot of money. It reduces the duration of symptoms. That is of help. I am not underestimating it. But in terms of vaccine, the $1 million question, a vaccine probably there are more than 100 vaccines in trial. Many of them are clinical trial. So I think by early next year, we are going to get vaccines. But how effective are they going to be? We don't know. Usually, to study of effectiveness of vaccine takes years. So I think we'll get some vaccine, and that would definitely help. I think, we need to keep things in perspective. If we lose perspective, this would perpetuate. The perspective is that this is a mild disease for vast majority of people. We got two examples of sitting with ourselves. Yes, Deetima have a moderately severe disease, but it is nowhere like of those, 4 or 5%. So it is a, it is a 4 or 5%, it could be critical. And we are talking about medicines for them, actually, not for other 85% for whom it is a self-limiting disease.
Okay.
So I think there is light end of the tunnel.
All right, that sounds good. But also the vaccine will come, but the other battle is mass production.
Just let me quickly add one thing. In regards to NHS, what Bhaskar said, actually NHS did a good job, but it was not tested to its limit, because the cases were always kept under the ICU capacity, you see. So it is a very interesting observation, you see. Hopefully, NHS was in a position even to respond even to a more severe form of epidemic.
Okay, all right. Good. Thank you, Dada. John, coming to you. I mean, we spoke about pandemic, but in between pandemic also we had events like Black Lives Matter, and thousands and thousands of protesters come on the streets, and obviously no social distancing. What I wanted to know from you, with I'm hoping that reduced workforce because of self-isolation and all that, how events like this add extra complications to police department?
I'd say probably the best way I can put it here is that it just you've got a very stretched service. So we're talking about police officers that, going back to mental health, as Deetima said, that they have been coming into work every single day whilst the pandemic's been going on, unaware really of what the risks were to themselves. They've still been doing that. Same with our colleagues from the ambulance service, because what you need to realise is obviously when there's a big protest like this, we will have ambulance service people there with us as well, because ultimately if things go badly or people need attention, etc. So it's putting stress, for me, it's putting stress onto an already fragile is the wrong way to put it, stretched service.
Yes.
So from the police point of view, I think that there will be mental health implications towards officers, towards our colleagues. I think that a lot of people that have come out for these protests have, to an extent, used it as an excuse. It's been the opportunity to come out. They know the protests are going to be allowed.
Yeah.
They've joined them wholeheartedly, and they've gone to them as spectators of what they're expecting to see. I think that they've been quite well controlled personally. I have been involved in them, working them. I think from my perspective, and it was sort of touching on it, it certainly does. But it's something that people have deemed to be important enough that they've wanted to come out and address it.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, as a police service, we're there. We police by consent. We are there to enable people to protest in a peaceful way. Peaceful being the key word.
Of course,
Going back to the question you asked me earlier, which was around the types of people that we would ultimately be dealing with via COVID-19, etc., and whether there was a pattern. In my opinion and my experience, it's a responsibility of society to do the right thing throughout this whole pandemic. Our countries have put in, whether it's India, whether it's the UK, we put in rules and that's been part of our strategy in response to protect our health service, protect our citizens, etc. I think that the same people that have flouted those rules are probably the same people that would flout other socially related rules. So we talked about antisocial behaviour earlier. For me, it's just another form of antisocial behaviour. It shows a lack of care for other people.
Sure.
And if I was to give any message, I would say, look, those guys that have been working in your supermarket, those guys that have been working in the hospitals, whether they're on the front line or front line of police services, in a petrol station delivering your food, it doesn't take that much effort to be kind to them, because they've been putting themselves at risk all the way through this.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more to that, John. And all I can say is, I mean, we owe so much to the police department and police officers like you who are out there every day putting yourself at risk. So, yeah, thank you so much. And I think on behalf of everybody, including the audience. So, yeah, thank you. Deetima, very quickly. So, in England, the number of deaths in the mental health department has doubled this year in comparison to the last year. Now, that's alarming. Now, do you think some of the reasons may be because there is a reduced workforce, staff rotation, and people on self-isolation, and also some of the services are suspended? Do you think there can be some of those reasons why such a spike in the number of deaths?
Yes, I mean, that's a very sad statistic. And you're right, services are stretched, just like the police. We know very well NHS has been stretched, mental health especially can be stretched. And very strikingly, even for me, after recuperation, my workload has doubled. And so there are out there people who are feeling the brunt of being at home without contact from their near and dear ones, their family, their friends, and that might have driven them over the edge, and things have happened. And obviously, in cases of people who have not been able to access the services that would have helped them to control their emotions or their presentation, as we say, that were not able to. But I know from speaking to my colleagues, my nursing colleagues, my other doctor colleagues, we have been working flat out, and I can only say and feel sorry for what has happened, and request anyone out there who needs and is seeking to come out and tell us what's happening to them so we can help them really.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm sure there are so many factors, and like John said, everybody's stressed out. So yeah, it's a difficult one, but those numbers are pretty sad as well. And finally, I'll just come to Bhaskar because we actually running out of time. So you being a frontline of
would be fine. Just carry on with that. You don't need anything else.
No people
problem.
say, all right. Some people, some frontline workers, they don't like to be called as frontliner. They don't like to be called as heroes. They don't like people to clap for them because it sounds like patronizing. Some say that, frontline workers are doing their duties, so what's the big deal? What do you make out of all of this as a frontline worker? What do you think? What's your view?
Yeah, I mean, people will have opinion, isn't it? So I'm not too bothered. I'm not too fast either. But I personally do not mind using these words for like my fellow healthcare professionals, or within the hospital we have got cleaners, we've got porters, different technicians, we've got police officers. So I always clapped at 8 o'clock for them. I mean, it was my personal way to show respect towards them. Clapping for carers, I think it was not an obligation, so it was just a request, wasn't it? So I did it out of respect. So I don't think it was patronizing at all. I mean, if somebody didn't want to do, you can sit back inside home. So I don't have any problem with that either.
Yeah.
Lastly, I think what I would like from general public, I think just follow government advice. Secondly, I'd say do not spread panic. And lastly, and most importantly, do not forward fake messages on social media. I mean, such rampant fake messages on social media. I think Jayanta and I spoke once. It's an infodemic as well. I mean, so many informations and false information are going around across the world. So just verify the message before sending or forwarding to somebody. So that's my message.
how wonderful to finish. I think the end is show that, don't panic, just follow the rules, and please do not share fake news on social media. And I could not thank you, each one of you, for your time. And I'm truly, absolutely, so appreciative of your time, all the insights. So thank you. Thank you to the Sentinel as well, for giving us the platforms that we could discuss things, and also to all the audience and all the viewers for watching this show. We will come back with another topic next week. But if you have got anything specific, let us know. We'll bring experts and talk about it. And until then, take good care, keep well, and we'll see you very soon. And thank you to all of you guys. Goodbye.
Thank you.